Hello everyone, and welcome to this new and exciting session in which we are going to look at APIs. Now, API stands for Application Programming Interface, and in this section we're going to look at why we even need APIs and also how they work. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you never miss amazing content like this. Now, supposing you've just built this model right here. Let's call this a model M1. And this model can take in an input and produce an output. The question is, how do I make my web app like this one, or my mobile app, or even my desktop app access this model which I've built such that a user of, let's say, this mobile app can, just by pressing a button, get access to this my model's predictions. The way we could go about this is by making use of APIs, that's application programming interfaces. As defined here on the g2.com website, an API permits software development and innovation to be easier by allowing programs, that is, for example, your web apps, to communicate data and functions safely and quickly. APIs, that's application programming interfaces, accelerate innovation because more developers can build products based on existing data and functionality. Getting back to our example, this means that thousands of users now on the web can get access to our model and make predictions without these developers of these web apps or mobile apps necessarily mastering the art of model creation. To even make these concepts clearer, let's take this example. So here we're supposing that you get into a restaurant, you give a command to the waiter, who then takes this command and then tells the cooks to make available the food you have in the command. Then once this food is ready, it sends it back to the waiter, that's the API, and then this waiter now passes on this food to you, who then eats it and is happy. Now, in the case of computer software, where we have, say, this mobile app which has to communicate with this API right here, then this communication has to follow certain rules or protocol known as the HTTP. This protocol guides the way information is being transmitted via the web. Now, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So this hypertext then transfer protocol. Now, the type of data exchange could be text, could be images, could be video, could be any kind of data which is understandable by both this client right here and the server. Also, communication following this HTTP protocol is connectionless. That is, each time this client needs to communicate with the server to know what objects are found in the particular image, a connection is created between these two. Now, once a connection is created and then the client receives the output, that is the particular location where the objects are found in an image, that connection is closed. And so we now have this which is taken off here. Then once we want to connect again with the API which is found on the server, we still create or recreate another connection. Then also, as we had said, the data exchange here isn't of a particular type. So really, this protocol doesn't force you to pass or receive a certain type of data. So far as the data you're passing or receiving is understood by the particular entity which is sending or receiving, then everything works just fine. Then the last property of HTTP protocol is it's actually stateless. That is, once you make a request and then you receive a response, no client information is being stored in this request response cycle. Hence, once data is being passed to the API and the response received, you should not expect to be able to retrieve this data which was being passed to the server. From this point, we are going to go in depth into how HTTP works. So you get to this address, www.postman.com. You could sign in or sign up in case you do not have an account with Postman. Now I have an account, so I'm just going to sign in. You get to this point here, you see you have workspaces, my workspace, and then you have this link here which comes by default. You have this URL, which is this information you pass in each time you want to gain access to a particular site. In this case, it's postmanecho.com. Now, URL actually stands for Uniform Resource Locator. And so this address right here permits us get access to certain resources which are located somewhere in the web. And this brings us to the HTTP methods. If you click right here, you'll see that we have different options. Like if you have the get, you have the post, you have the put, you have the patch, and so on and so forth. These are known as the HTTP method. And each time you want to get access to a resource which is located somewhere in the web, you have to specify the exact method. So like with a get, for example, we are saying that we want to get a resource. For the post, unlike the get method where our main interest is to retrieve some data, here we submit an entity to the specified resource, which often causes a change in state or side effects at the level of the server. So this means that we could make use of the get method when we want to retrieve a user's information, and then we can make use of the post when we want to modify some data or add information. So like for example, if you want to get registered on a platform, then we make use of this post request, as we're going to add a row on the database. So suppose we have this database right here where we have the user's ID, we have the user's name, and for example the user's password. So here we have this small database, and then we have ID. Let's say ID 0, we have the name Fred, and password, let's say whatever value we have here. Now then we have ID 1, let's say Sally, and then we have whatever password here. Then we could take 2, we have Rita, and we have whatever name we want to have here, or rather whatever password we want to have here. So this is it. Now with the get request, we could just retrieve that Fred has an ID of 0, his name is Fred, and the password is a given password. Whereas with the post request, we could add a new user. So that's why they speak of causing a change in state or side effects on the server. So we could actually add this new user by passing information via this post request. So here we could add this third, and we could add, say, Mac, let's say Mac, and that's it. So that's it for the post request. Now with the put request, we could update this data. So this means that here we could say we are not interested in maybe modifying the name, but if we want to update this password, we could change this password now to some new password. So now we could update this row right here in the database. Now we could also delete, so we could just simply take this off with our delete request, and that will be it for that row. We also have other methods like the head, the connect options, trace, and patch, which you could check out in this document right here. But most times we make use of the get, post, put, and delete. Then also these responses have some status codes, which we have seen already. So you maybe have seen 200 for OK. So OK, when you make a request and it's OK, you could receive that. Let's make this request here. URL empty. Let's get back here, and you see your status. Let's highlight this. You see your status OK. So these are as we have seen here. Let's get back. this as we have seen here, HTTP response status codes. So you could again check in this documentation and have every detail about the different status codes, and you need to understand how to work with them, as they're very important when you're dealing with APIs. So here we have informational responses, successful responses, lying between 200 and 299, and that's why you see here we have this 200 status code, which is a success. And then we have redirections, we have client error, and we have server error. So if this error is coming from the person sending the API request, then it will be between 400 and 499. If the error is from the server, it will be between 500 and 599. So when the server is down, sometimes you will see this 500. So you could check here, internal server error. The server has encountered a situation it does not know how to handle. So you could check out all this in this documentation. Now let's get back here and make this error. So let's put in whatever value we want here. Write that again, and you should see here, you see 404 not found. So you get here, you see 404 client error. So this error comes from the client. We are gonna paste this out here and then select the post request, get to the body, form data. This is the information we'll be passing in. So here we're gonna have email teams@neuralearn.ai, the password, not a password, and then job neuralearns, and then click on send. Okay, what do we get? You see we have this output right here. We have our email, the username, the job, and a token, status 200. Now you'll notice that unlike with the get request, we have now introduced this body data. So if we don't pass this body data, you see that we wouldn't have the right output. And this is because to log in to just any platform, obviously you need to pass in your credentials, which in this case are the email, the password, and the job. So this tells us that when doing an API call like this one, so when trying to make the client communicate with the server, we need to specify the HTTP method, we need to specify the URL, then we also need to specify the body, which in this case is all this information right here. That's the body information, and the header information. Now this header and body information could be broken up into the request and response. So this is the request body, and here is the response body. And then here we have the request header and the response header, which you can get by simply clicking on this right here. You can also check out a list of HTTP headers on this developer.mozilla.org platform right here. Then at the level of this response headers, take note of this content type, which is JSON. JSON actually stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which is a very easy and lightweight format for storing and transporting data from a client to a server and vice versa. The JSON format is programming language independent, and so if we have this client with code reading in JavaScript, it can communicate JSON data to this API via this request, which is reading, for example, in another programming language like Python. And then after processing data, the response in JSON format will still be understood by this JavaScript client. Now to better understand the JSON formatting, let's look at this output which was generated after we made the GET request on this Postman Echo API right here. You would first notice that it starts and ends with this curly braces. So we start like this and we end this way. And then we have information stored in key value pairs. So we have the key and then we have the value. And then each key value pair is separated by a comma. So we have the first key, you see here, key, and then we have the colon, and then we have the value. We have a comma, and then the next, let's say key 1, value 1, and then next we have key 2, value 2, and then separated also by a comma from the rest, and so on and so forth. So here you see we have, this is key 1 here, key 1, value 1, we have the comma, and then we have key 2, this headers, key 2 headers, and then value 2. Now value 2 here is all this here, so all this data is our value 2. So all this is our value 2, and then we have a comma, just like here we had this comma, and then after we have key 3 and then value 3. Now for a particular value we could also have some sort of dictionary, and so in this case, let's take all this off. In this case where we had this empty dictionary, this was quite simple, but here we have this dictionary filled with its own key value pairs. So here we have this key and we have this value, and then this value is a dictionary made of its own key value pairs. See, you have the commas again, and just like that. So you have the commas separating each and every key value pair, and then here you just have this string. So basically what we're having here is we're having a key, which is a string, and we have a value, which is some variable. Now this variable can be a dictionary, like in the first two examples, or it could be a string, or it could be an integer, or even a boolean. Now if you check on this other request here, the push request, you would see this same formatting. So we have the curly braces which open and close, and then we have each key and its value, the key is value, key value, and finally key value. Now this was for the response, so this was the response body. Let's go ahead and check at the request body. Request body, we had this form data, but actually we could have raw JSON data which is passed. So instead of using this, like basically using this GUI, we could have this raw and then pass in JSON data. So you see here, it's actually very easy to write this out. Let's have this here. Let's check back at the form data. We have email, password, and job. Yeah, we have the same. So we have email. There we go. We specify the email on neurolearn.ai, and then we have the password. Our password is not a password, so not a password. There we go. Next and final one, we have the job. We have here learns. Okay, so we have that. So notice how here we considering this raw data which we're going to pass in, and we're going to see the output we get here. So let's send this, and what do we get? Here's what we get as output. You see here, unsupported media type, text plain in request. So this means that the request we sent was text type and not the JSON format. So you'll notice here we have text which was selected, and we just simply have to change this to JSON. So changing this to JSON, what do you notice is here changing color. That is because this now knows that here are the keys which are in red and the values in blue. If it takes it back to, you see, it turns back to all black. Let's get back to JSON and then rerun this. So we click on send, and let's see the output. JSON parse error. We check that here. Let's take that off and then send again. Okay, so you see now that once we correct that and send this JSON data, we have this output. So basically using this form data right here, which we could now take off, let's take this off, is the same as passing this raw JSON data. So the role of Postman is to make it easier for people to test their APIs using this kinds of graphical user interface, but you could always actually do it by passing this raw JSON data, as you can see here. And so now you have the status okay. Whereas when we had this text, let's send, so you could see the status. You see 415 unsupported media type. Let's get back to JSON and send, and that's what we have. You also notice again that at the level of the headers, we have this JSON format. So the body, the output we have here is JSON data. Then instead of passing this, let's add in some random stuff here and click on send. What do we have? We have file for not found, but we'll notice that the content type that we have now is no longer the JSON, but instead HTML. And when you check out the body, you see we have this error preview page not found. This shows us that we can have different content types exchanged between the client and the server.